Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Voter Suppression discussion. Please remember to turn off your video and your mics. We will have a question and answer session towards the end of our discussion. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat box and we'll get to them later. This event will be recorded and available for viewing on all of the League's social media platform sites. Before turning it over to our moderator this evening, I'd like to thank her and the rest of the panelists for joining us. Tonight we have William Anderson, who is a Penn State grad and has worked tirelessly with the Black Political Empowerment Project, B-PEP, which was launched in 1986 to ensure the Pittsburgh African American community vote in every single election. Along with B-PEP, he is committed to volunteering with various political affiliations and founded the PA Coalition of Young Democrats. We also have Brenda Tate. Brenda is a retired 40-year veteran of the Pittsburgh law enforcement. Since her retirement, she has been committed to supporting and encouraging minorities to run for political office and educating young people about the importance of voting. As the chair of the Black Vote Coalition, she does just that. Marion Schneider has served as Deputy Secretary of Elections Administration at the PA Department of State under Governor Wolf. She has worked as a voting rights and election security attorney for 15 years, and she successfully challenged the constitutionality of the PA voter ID law and was the president of the nonprofit Verified Voting. Andy Szefi is our current Allegheny County Solicitor. He's the Chief Legal Officer of the county and also serves as the Director of the Law Department. Andy was selected by Allegheny County Executive Rich Fitzgerald and has served since February 2012. Marybeth Kuznik, who will join us in a little bit, is an experienced lobbyist and advocate for voting rights and verifiable paper ballot voting systems. She is currently the director of VotePA, not VotesPA, VotePA, which is a nonpartisan organization of concerned voters across the state working to ensure fair and accurate elections. Our moderator this evening is Lynne Hayes Freeland. She is the producer and host of the Lynne Hayes Freeland Show, a weekly show on KDKA that concentrates on local African American issues. She's also an active member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. Through this sorority, she has been involved in a variety of community service work, including volunteering time to serve on several boards. Her work has been recognized by organizations both locally and nationally. I'll turn it over to you, Lynn.
There's always that delay while you unmute your microphone. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this evening. Certainly when we talk about this election, voter suppression, it is a critical issue for our the focus of our conversation. Marian, I'd like to start with you at this point, and my first question to you would be, looking at Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, are there concerns about voter suppression at this point? We're 3 weeks away from the actual election day, but of course, as we know, voting has started already.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me tonight. There's always issues on election day, and they run the gamut of issues, especially for in-person voting. What makes this year different is because of the global pandemic. We have an enormous number of voters who are voting using mail-in ballots. So I think that what we have seen, in addition to all the usual issues, is that there's been litigation across the Commonwealth trying to make it harder for Pennsylvania voters to vote. And actually, there were some developments in that litigation over the weekend. The federal court suit that was filed in the Western District of Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh, the judge issued a decision dismissing all of the remaining claims of the plaintiffs who were the RNC, the Trump campaign, and other Republican plaintiffs. And so what that means for voters is that Dropbox can be used, satellite offices can be used, and the voters should be confident about getting their mail-in ballots back. But we do see things on, I mean, I'm not sure if you want me to talk about things that happen on election day or things that might happen in advance, but a lot of times voters can be disenfranchised when people don't apply the law correctly. Like, for example, in the polling place, if people are asked for ID when they shouldn't be and then denied the right to vote because they don't have an ID, or if there are bad actors in the polling place who are challenging voters. And I can talk about poll watchers later, but I hope that answers your question now.
Yeah, and I think we can come back to poll watchers in a little bit, because certainly there's been a lot of conversation about poll watchers this year in particular. Brenda, let me come to you, because certainly when we talk about mail-in ballots, and today I think that a lot of people got thrown for a loop when we found out that nearly 30,000 people in Allegheny County got the wrong ballots. Now that issue is being addressed, but it then goes to heighten concerns about mail-in ballots.
Hi, Lynn, and thank you all for having me here this evening. You're absolutely right. That does create the appearance around mail-in ballots that they are not safe. And on top of that, with the conversation coming from the administration, coupled with that, it doesn't make it a good narrative for the country. So absolutely, they are fixing this debacle, unfortunately, right, Andy? And it will be addressed. But I'm happy to see that media today, both radio talk shows on KDKA, has not been influencing that narrative that voting mail-in ballot is not safe. So I'm happy to see the media being very clear of what the issue is, and it is corrected. And people have to know that these are unprecedented times, and things are going to happen that have never happened before, such as when you talk about voter suppression here in August, a group called Project 1599. I came home and I had a phone call on my voicemail that from a group called 1599. The voice was clearly a young African-American young girl. And she indicated that mail-in ballots were not safe. And if in fact I used the mail-in ballot system, that I would be at risk for having my information go to the police department, and my taxes would be looked at. And it just startled me. I was like, wow. But being a police officer, I thought, this is kind of strange, and I think I better hold on to this. And I did. And sure enough, I was contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office with regards to this group. So when you talk about voter suppression, this election has exposed a lot of tactics and things that have come out to target the African-American community that will, at least maybe whoever received that call maybe took it seriously and thought about not doing a mail-in ballot.
And let me unmute. Okay. Let me just say that I didn't deliberately save the two men for last in terms of the first round of questioning. But Andy, let me circle back to you, because again, 30,000 29 and some change ballots. That is a lot. It was, I guess, from what I understand, an error on the part of a third-party vendor. The county has responded. People will be getting new ballots. And I know it was a big news story today. Will there be other efforts to make sure that people get the right information so they know what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Brenda. I want to thank the league for having me with you tonight. I hope you can all, I mean, I've hijacked my daughter's room here. I can assure you that my room is not this colorful. So yeah, what I think we need to sort of step back and recognize, and we have to take a big picture of how we got to where we are. Running an election under the most ideal of circumstances is hard. What we're having to deal with in the county and counties all around the state that run elections is sort of back in October of 2019, we had this major overhaul to the county election code that had been in place since 1937, which for the first time provided for no excuse mail-in absentee voting. So that was going to be a huge change. At around that same time, we got all new voting systems. We were going to have traceable paper ballots at the same time. And if that was the only change we were implementing during an election, that would be a major challenge. So you take those two things together and you've got some major challenges. And now let's layer on top of that a pandemic. I think when Act 77 passed, no excuse mail-in voting, I can assure you that no one contemplated we had 220,000 mail-in ballots, combined mail-in and absentee ballots in the primary. I can assure you no one contemplated that number when that act was passed. No one saw a pandemic coming. We anticipate having we've received 370,000 or so applications and have approved 70,000 applications for mail-in ballots for the general. So you have a huge number of mail-in ballots for the first time in a general election. What that necessitated, not only just in Allegheny County, but around the state, was the infrastructure to print, collate, and put in the envelopes 380,000 ballots was not something the county could do in-house. That necessitated obtaining an outside contractor, which is what we in other counties did. And so the error that occurred with that third-party contractor is certainly not anything that anybody wanted to happen. As soon as we found out about it, I know our elections people first had to get to the root cause of the problem, find out how many were affected. And you can't solve the problem until you know how big it is. So once they got to that, they said, all right, how are we going to fix it? What are we going to do? And we spent the last 2 days, I can tell you a lot of people didn't get much sleep the last 2 days figuring out what the fix is. So we think we have a good fix in place. We have built in what they call network QA, QC, quality assurance and quality control procedures to make sure nothing like that is repeated. So I think from the county's perspective, what we can say is, making sure that everyone can vote, will vote, and that their votes will be safe is the top priority that the elections division, certainly my department, the law department, the county executive, the board of elections, I can speak for all of them in saying that is the top priority and something we'll continue to do. It's not something anybody's happy about. It's not something that was occurred inside the county, but hey, look, we did contract with them and we have to deal with it and fix it. So, we're comfortable now that we've taken the measures that we need to address it. And we hope that people have some degree of understanding that we're dealing with an unprecedented situation and that we'll do everything we can to make sure everyone who should get their ballot does get it.
And it is interesting that we're having this conversation because our focus is clearly voter suppression, and that part of it is really not part of that conversation. It just kind of all fits into the overall issue. So William, as I come to you under the umbrella of voter suppression, are there any efforts or any organizations that you've become aware of that concern you when we talk about suppressing voters as we get closer to this November date?
Well, I mean, I think as far as, we're concerned, we haven't really heard of any direct, as it were, nor partisan. We won't say any direct, we know where the direct voter suppression is coming from, but it isn't from any outside organizations that we know of because everything is so direct now. So, it's coming from, places, the minority community here in Pittsburgh, it comes from, you know, switching polling places, from things that really aren't directly, you know, visual. So our, you know, suppression in our community comes as like, you know, an uprising in police. You know, like Miss Brenda said, you get a phone call where someone says that, you know, if you're a felon and if you try to vote, you know, you're going to be arrested, or something that, you know, you can see flyers hanging around all of a sudden that telling you that if you're a convicted felon, you can't vote. So it's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation in our community that we fight, that is the biggest, you know, form of voter suppression, you know, that we face. So it's more of misinformation, like, you know, blaming things on the county that the county has no control over. So then it leads to mistrust in the system when the system really isn't broken. So, you know, it's just that type of misinformation that, you know, is the greatest form of voter suppression that we fight in our community. So we just try to stay vigilant and don't try to feed into any of that, and try to stay consistent and, you know, work with partners like Ms. Brenda and form coalitions so that we are not behind the 8 ball. You know, so we're not being reactive to the situation, we're being proactive. So we're educating our communities so that when they get this type of misinformation, they have the correct information and it's coming from a valuable source that they trust in the community, because we're with them year round, not just around election time. So.
And that makes perfect sense, because if you're getting that kind of information, that instills fear, and that in turn keeps people away from the polls. So then I'm going to bring that full circle back to you, Marian, because certainly we have heard people be encouraged to go to the polls, to become poll watchers, to almost take on the role of poll intimidators. What kinds of things? I was on a call the other day with Eric Holder, who basically was saying to voters, don't be afraid and don't let people make you fearful. You have a right to vote. Go and vote. But what are some things people should keep in mind if they are going to vote in person?
Well, that's a great question. I want to step back a minute and talk about poll watchers in Pennsylvania, because the whether poll watchers are permitted, it's a matter of state law. And we talked a little bit about the federal lawsuit. The rule in Pennsylvania is that a poll watcher has to be a registered voter in the county in which they are assigned to watch a poll. And what are poll watchers under Pennsylvania law? They're partisan appointees. A candidate or a party appoints them, and they are permitted to be in the polling place to observe. They may not talk to voters. They may not interfere with voting. All of their concerns need to be addressed to the judge of elections, and they have to stay 6 feet away from where voting occurs. So those poll watchers, both the Republican and Democrats, are permitted to have poll watchers in the polling place. There's a limit, 1 per party, 1 per candidate. Usually, most jurisdictions limited to two each inside the polling place. So, and they have to have a certificate issued by the county and show that on election day. So that group of poll watchers they're allowed to be in there. They can keep track of who votes. They do have some ability to challenge voters. But what you're hearing about is people coming from other states and coming into the, Pennsylvania to watch the polls. They can't go inside. They have to stay at least 10 feet from the entrance. They are not allowed to interfere with voters who are in line. They're intimidating voters, harassing or threatening them is against the law. It's against Pennsylvania law. It's against the Voting Rights Act. So people should, be strong. And the other thing I really want to talk about is the Election Protection Coalition, because the ACLU is in coalition with many other groups. It's a national coalition to protect everyone's vote. And they will have field volunteers. So there will be volunteers, nonprofit, nonpartisan volunteers selected at polling places, and they'll be available for you to address your concerns to. And there's also a hotline which is going to be shared at the end, 1-866-RVOTE. So if you see anything, you can call that hotline. But in addition, ACLU has lawyers that we recruit who can go into court and get an order if necessary in counties, especially Allegheny County. And the command center is staffed by 2 seasoned ACLU lawyers, Sarah Rose and Vic Volchek, who will be in Pittsburgh on election day. So don't be intimidated by those things, because the poll workers know the law. There will be volunteers, nonpartisan, nonprofit volunteers. I'm sure Andy has things he might want to say about what they're doing to protect your right to vote. So just know that there are people working really hard to make sure that everyone can cast their ballot uninhibited.
So I want to just ask you one follow-up question. So
Sure.
if I'm in the line,
Yes.
and there's someone who comes up and wants to ask me questions or prod me on something, they don't have the right to do that.
They don't have the right to interfere with your right to vote. And and they shouldn't, really, they should be 6 feet away. We all should be 6 feet away from everybody with COVID, right?
Mhm.
So nobody should be approaching you, but if you'll be able to recognize the election protection volunteers, because they're going to have vests and they're going to say Election Protection Coalition. So you'll be able to see folks in the field. And actually, I think Brenda and William are part of that coalition as well.
Okay. I was gonna actually come to you next, Brenda, because we're getting a lot of questions, and I know the questions were gonna come at the end, but I'm gonna try to incorporate some of the questions into the conversation, because I don't know that we'll get them all in at the end. But there are a lot of questions people are asking. How do they know, for example, that the ballot they're receiving in the mail is legitimate? How do they know that what they're receiving in the mail is a real ballot, is a legitimate ballot?
I mean, I guess I can field that one for you,
Okay.
Brenda. And I know Ron with the league has posted his response on that, and I encourage people to check that out. They are labeled official election mail, official election ballot. It comes from the county elections office. I suppose there are entities out there that could, sort of manufacture some close facsimile of an official ballot, but it has a barcode on it. It'll have your name and address in the top left corner with a barcode. When you open the envelope, because there'll be 3 envelopes essentially. There'll be an envelope that everything comes in. There'll be what's called a declaration envelope. That's what you send your ballot back in. Inside, there'll also be a smaller plain white envelope that just says official election ballot, and then there'll be your ballot itself. So if you're getting something, an official ballot, you'll have all those things in that envelope. So it's hard to recreate all 3 of those things, and that's what you should look for. A ballot, what's called a secrecy envelope that says official election ballot, and then what's called a declaration ballot, and that'll have a barcode, your name and address, and on the back of it will have what's called a declaration, where you print your name, your address, you date it, and then you sign it. Below that is if you had any help. There's lines for if you had any help with completing your ballot. But so all of those things are sort of the indicators that yes, you have received an official mail-in ballot. I see that it's on the chat here, pavoterservices.pa.gov. You can go on there and check the status of your ballot. We get reports from people, and that's a state website. That's not a county website. That is the state Department of State system. The counties, all counties in Pennsylvania, sort of work off the state system to see, to run elections, and in terms, especially with the mail-in. But you can go on there and check. You can click ballot status, and you can see when your application was received, when your ballot was mailed, and then when your ballot was received back. If you're having issues, if it's popping up, we've heard people say, I look on there and my information's not on there. And I see someone in the chat saying this. What I would encourage you to do is check with the elections department, to call them down there. That is a state website system. If you're not showing up there and you are a registered voter and you've received your application, sent in your application and received your ballot, and they can track it for you through the Shore system or go kind of around the website. So I would encourage you to do that directly to the elections division downtown.
Okay, and Andy, there are a couple things in the chat. I'm going to ask you to check those out. But I do know that because I was actually on the county site today as well, and I think part of the ballot confusion or ballot chaos is going to go live tomorrow. So some of that information folks are looking for on that county site is not up today, but it does say that it will go live tomorrow, because I did have an issue, that same issue with my dad's ballot. So I went to check it today and it said it'll go live tomorrow. William, I'm going to circle back around to you because, you know, a couple of years ago, there was a big debate about voter ID and whether or not you had to present identification when you went into the polling place. Have you had personal experience where voters were asked for identification in a polling place?
Yeah, I actually had, a couple experiences in Homewood when that came out, where people, because they may have not updated their ID or they had just moved, that people were asking them, for their ID and trying to send them back to their old polling place to vote. So that was part of, the big fight, and another coalition that at B-PEP that we're part of is, fighting, legislation and stuff. Of voter suppression is people in office, basically picking their own voters and deciding who they get to represent and who gets the proper representation.
And then for clarification purposes, in terms of being asked for identification at the polling place, what exactly are the regulations there?
Well, if you go to the polling place and it's your first time voting at that polling place, then the person at the polling place, I believe, does have the right to ask you for your ID, to show an ID. Mm-hmm. But it's the requirement isn't, it just has to be a state issued photo ID. The problem with the law before was that they were saying that student IDs weren't good enough and making all that, but if you had a gun license, that ID was good enough.
But the key there is if it's the first time voting. Once you have established a voting record, you do not have to present identification, correct?
You're not required to present ID.
And Brenda, let me switch over to you, because the other thing that's happening this year is the registration. When you have to register to vote, those rules have all changed. This year we have satellite locations. People can actually walk up and fill out paperwork at that satellite location. And people need to understand that they can do those things. And there are not limitations. If people are at these satellite offices or standing around, I'm guessing that the potential for intimidation could exist in those environments as well.
Well, Lynn, last week, the first satellite location in Homewood, CCAC, was open. And I just want to commend the county on the job that they've done around these satellites. And the coalitions that have formed. It's the Black Vote Matters coalition that was all a part of this whole affair around the satellites. And it was extremely festive. We never saw any poll intimidation out there. The lines were long. I think the first day there was something like, 18,000 people? I'm not sure of the number, but it was a very festive scene. There was stage, there were music. People seemed to be very comfortable. People of all races were voting. They've done a great job. They had county sheriffs were around. There were staff from CCAC, and it was just a very comforting system. It gave me so much hope because it was sort of watching the lines that I watched during the Obama administration when he was being elected. So people are excited and wanting to come out. This week, I targeted seniors in the beginning, before COVID. And I had Andy come in to help us through the Act 77. It was really new. And we started targeting these high rises. And we did pretty good. We were registering mail-in ballot applications. So since then, we've had to get creative, figure out ways to get in there and register these seniors. Well, this weekend, the 17th and 18th, the satellite will be in the Hill District at the Shop and Save. The coalition, Black Votes Matter, will recreate the same atmosphere around the Shop and Save. There's a lot of activity that will be there. My organization, we got a bus. We got buses donated to us by SD Transit. And she donated the buses, she donated the fuel. And Macedonia came in and donated the cost for the drivers. And we're targeting all seniors. We have some friends that are attorneys that will ride the buses with the seniors, monitors on the buses to make sure they're safe, COVID safe. And the attorneys will just ask questions. If you have your ballot, do you have all the components of that ballot? Is your ballot signed? Is the declaration envelope signed? Everything that has to be done by the time the seniors get to the Shop and Save, those are the questions we'll be asking the seniors. So hopefully that'll go off. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was going to go back to Marian because I noticed in the comments too that you mentioned we were talking about the identification. So can you just clarify? It does not have to be a photo ID, or it does have to be?
It does
not.
not.
There's so many comments. I'm having trouble keeping up with all of them, so I have to come back to you sometimes.
Right. So the first-time voters have to show a form of ID, and there's different categories of acceptable ID. Photo ID, of course, will be accepted, but if you don't have a photo ID, you can show non-photo ID as long as it has your address. And the example I gave in the chat is your voter registration card is acceptable, but you can also show a utility bill, a tax bill, anything that has the address of your registration and your name on it. So, but there's also, these are non-exhaustive lists, and the lists are, the Department of State has guidance on ID on its website. They're non-exhaustive, right? So if there's other official photo IDs, those work, and other correspondence with your name and address on those will work as well.
So Andy, this is probably a good time for me to then ask you about the fact, I mean, we've already seen significant turnouts in the early voting. Are there estimates? Is there an anticipation of what November 3rd could look like in a pandemic year? And are there arrangements in place for safety?
Yeah, so I think when you talk about turnout in a presidential election, I think this election, 2020 general election, my guess is that you're going to see the highest overall turnout that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. That's my guess. It's a guess. It's an informed guess, but it's a guess. We have 900,000 registered voters in Allegheny County. If you got, 70% turnout, which would be high turnout in any election, you're looking at what? You're pushing 650,000. We might see 700,000 probably votes, so we're higher, more like 75% turnout. We've already received 360 or 370,000 mail-in applications. Of those applications, I think about 170, 180,000 ballots have already been returned. Okay, so let's just say we got 80% return on our 360,000 applications. you're in the high 280, 200,000s of voters right there. And that doesn't count anybody who's going to vote in person. So I think it's a very real possibility that we're going to exceed 700,000 voters for this election. I think if people are voting in person, I think you can expect that to be, you're going to see some lines, you're going to see some high traffic. I think people need to be prepared and make a plan. It's not necessarily going to take 5 minutes like it might during a primary or sort of off-year election. That's a very real possibility, and I encourage people to plan for that. Whatever you're going to do, however you're going to vote, whether it's at one of these satellite offices, whether it's pure regular mail-in, or whether you're going to go in person, what I encourage everyone to do, what we're encouraging everyone to do, is to formulate your plan for how you're going to do it and stick to that plan. And if you're going to vote in person, allow some time. If you show up at 7 a.m. when polls open, I would anticipate there will be a line. I think that you can bank on that. If you come around right around lunchtime or come right around rush hour, I think those are the times that we see lines in a non-presidential year. So you can probably count on there being some lines in those peak times. So I would encourage everyone to anticipate that and plan for it and allow yourself all the time that you need if you're going to be voting in person.
I'm not going to address this to any one of our panelists in particular, but I'm curious to have all of you weigh in on this. So yesterday, I was downtown talking to someone who works as a nail technician. And she said to me that she was not going to be working the Tuesday of Election Day because she's already had her regular clients cancel that day. She said that they were told not to come into town that day, that they were anticipating trouble. Their offices were going to be closed for that week, and she was afraid. Is that a form of intimidation? Is that a form of suppression, spreading those kinds of fears in downtown Pittsburgh?
I would say absolutely. Anytime there's any implications or where a person feel as though that they can't move freely to come and go wherever they want to go, absolutely, I think it's a form of intimidation. And back to what Will was saying, you know, the messages that are out there, there's not a week that go by in my community that I see these flyers hanging. And what I suggest anybody to do that see those flyers is to call 911. That has to be recorded. We have, well, Pittsburgh Police has a unit that handles that kind of information. And they always need to know what happened and how it happened and where it happened, because they have to match that information up with organizations that they're already looking at. So in the city of Pittsburgh, it's always an ongoing investigation. Just like the other day out in Homewood, I don't know, Will, if you can expound on that they, yeah, right there at the CCAC, they covered the CCAC with sickle and hammer and those kind of signs that were on the building. They spray painted. So that is out there, and that is real too, Lynn.
Yeah, I would just, yeah, like Miss Brenda said, it's like a hammer and sickle. They're spray painting. Don't vote. Don't vote. Fight the revolution. It says, "Don't vote, fight the revolution." So it's a subtle type of intimidation like that is going on, and you know, and it's like a direct attack. But we have to be vigilant, like I said before, and we have to inform our community and tell them, because someone might take that they can't, the town's closed, that they can't vote, that everything is shut down, and they may think because they can't go to work that maybe it's some type of holiday, and it's in like they've done before. They send out mailers that saying that the election's on November 4th. You know, so if you're busy and you're not really, you know, paying attention, that might catch you off guard, and you may not go to vote. And they know how many people that they want to disenfranchise and who they're targeting. And like we always tell our community, if your vote wasn't so valuable, they wouldn't try to steal it. So we just have to be vigilant and keep to inform people. And like Ms. Brenda said, we have to, we use our cell phones for everything else. We're taking selfies and all sorts of things, but it's the most powerful weapon we have, and we need to start using it for a positive, use, documenting stuff like she said, and, keeping track of it and sending it and posting it so that other people don't fall for the same thing. It's like a pyramid scam going around, but we're not protecting each other from it by sharing the information that can save us all.
And that's when we need the media.
Well, it's totally voter suppression, trying to sow distrust and discord. But I think this is part of a much broader disinformation campaign. And so I think it's really important that people know where are the trusted sources of information. And those trusted sources are the County Elections Office, the Pennsylvania Department of State, organizations, nonprofit organizations like the ones in this panel who have been operating for years and doing enormous work on voter education. ACLU has a FAQ and Know Your Rights on their page. So I think it's it's so disheartening to hear when this type of disinformation is actually succeeding. But it's so important to get the message out to people of where to turn for accurate, truthful information about what's going to happen. And that's the best advice that I can give on that.
I would echo exactly what Marion just said. I would encourage people, don't get your information from Facebook, don't get your information from Twitter, don't get your information from any social media. Get your information from trusted sources. Yes, we have reliable media outlets here in Pittsburgh. There are reliable sources like the Allegheny County Elections Department, AlleghenyVotes.com, VotesPA.com, the state website. That's where you should go to get information. The stuff that gets propagated, retweeted, and liked, and just, foments out there on the internet is not reliable information. It is not reliable information. And it breaks my heart too when people read it and think, oh my God, this is all going to happen. I would just stress again what Marion just said. Go to reliable sources of information, and to reiterate what I said before, make your plan on how you want to vote and stick to that plan.
So Andy, I'm going to come back to you because just watching the information in this chat, there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of questions about these ballots that are being replaced. There are a lot of questions about people who are now changing their minds, may have sent in the wrong ballot, and now they don't know what to do. So ironically, I mentioned my dad did get the wrong ballot. We were filling them out together. We got 3/4 of the way through, and he said to me, hey, should I vote for so-and-so? And I was like, no, because that's not for our district. That's when I realized his ballot was different from mine, and we live in the same house. I looked at his ballot, and that's when I realized he had the wrong information on his ballot. So I said, well, give that back to me. This is a problem. So he didn't mail his in, but obviously a lot of people did send theirs in. So let's start there. If you got the wrong ballot, you sent it in, you'll be getting a new ballot. Now you're afraid to send that one in. Can you take that in? Can you now hand that one in, the new ballot?
Yes. So the only place, let me just start from the top there. If you mistakenly got the wrong ballot, you will be receiving a new one in the mail. Okay, that universe of people has been identified, and you'll be receiving a new one. Frankly, I encourage people to fill out that new one and send it back in. We know who those people are, and to the extent that those people filled out and returned their ballots, I saw this in the chat, those will be pulled because we know they get scanned in, and those will be flagged and pulled and set aside. And your new ballot will supersede that. It'll be designated specially, I think it's in green, and it says corrected ballot. And that ballot is the one that will count. If you want to take your ballot to the polling place, you have the option at the polling place to spoil your ballot. You have to sign an affidavit, a declaration that you're spoiling your ballot. I saw a question in here in the chat somewhere that will that delay lines? I think that process is going to take a little bit longer than normally, than just regular voting. And no, the answer is no, there won't be a separate line. There's only one desk where you can sign the list and check in to vote and get your ballot for each precinct. So yeah, I think that will take a little bit longer. And yes, sadly, because of a lot of the information that's out there, we do anticipate that being utilized way more than we would like. But that is a right people have, and then you can do it at the polling place.
Did I hear you say, Andy, that it would say in green corrected ballot?
I'm pretty sure it's green.
But it'll say corrected ballot.
That's right. That's right. I don't pick the colors. I know it won't be red or blue because that was a whole thing. But I think it's green. It'll say corrected ballot, and that you should be getting that if you were on the list, if you were on the affected list. This is turning into the how many people watched Mazeroski's home run suddenly. I don't know how. We've identified it as 28,000 roughly people. But you will be getting that ballot sometime, hopefully in the next week. They'll start going out actually tomorrow. So whether you want to or not, if you applied for mail-in ballot and got the wrong one, you will be getting the corrected ballot. Let me clarify two things with regard to these satellite sites too that I've seen pop up in the chat. You cannot register to vote at the satellite sites. They don't have that ability. We didn't want to overload these people, number one. Number two, you are not going to be able to swap out the incorrect ballot at the satellite site. The reason for that is this: it's bad enough that the mistake was made and there's 2 ballots out there. We don't want 3 to keep track of. So those ballots are going to be mailed. This weekend, you will not be able to go to the satellite sites. There's 4 of them. You can check AlleghenyVotes.com to see where those are. But you will be getting the corrected ballot in the mail, and it will clearly designate corrected ballot, and you should use the new envelope that comes that also says corrected ballot on it to send that ballot back.
So
Andy, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
There's a question I've been getting from a lot of seniors. There's seniors that have not asked for application for mail-in ballot and are not expecting one. They're asking if they go to, if I have some on the bus, can they go into the satellite location, fill out a mail-in ballot application right there, and then receive a ballot and cast their ballot?
Yes, the answer is yes. If they have not already applied and their application has not already been processed and they don't have a ballot on the way, then yes, if you're starting that process for the first time, you can go to one of the satellite offices and do just that. Apply there on the spot, receive your ballot. You can complete it there, put it in the envelopes, and put it in the ballot box, or you can take your ballot in the envelopes with you and do that at home if that's what you choose to do, and put it in the mail. You can do that too. What you can't do at these satellite sites, which no one can do before November 3rd, is vote on the scanners like you will on November 3rd. That is not an option at satellite sites. That can only be done on election day. These are essentially, it's a weird thing because of the laws we have in Pennsylvania. It's not early voting in the traditional sense that some states have. It's not showing up and voting on the machine like you will on November 3rd. It is pre-election day in-person mail-in voting, if you can believe that. I mean, you can keep track of all that. That's what it is. That's the law we have. That's Act 77. We can just call it what it is. That's what we've got. Maybe someday in the future, we're transitioning toward all mail-in elections. I hope so, but it is what we've got now. And though it has a sort of wordy and tough to decipher name to it, it is what it is.
Andy, I want to lift up a question from the chat. What would happen to if somebody got an incorrect ballot and just returns that one and doesn't return the corrected one? How will that ballot be counted?
Yeah, that gets really weird. So here's, if they return that one and never return the corrected ballot. So that ballot essentially will count to the extent that voter was eligible to vote for the positions on that ballot, okay? So if it was correct, everyone's is correct for president, everyone's is correct for all the statewide row offices, treasurer, attorney general. When you get down to state senator and state rep, that's where they can go inaccurate. So if you never do your corrected ballot, your presidential and statewide row office votes will count. What will probably happen, we think we're pretty sure about this, and we're verifying this with the Department of State, is that those other elections that you were not eligible for will technically count, but they will count as write-in votes for the district, incorrect ballot district that you got those ballots for. So the people that you may have accidentally voted for won't be on the ballot in those districts, and your vote would count as a write-in vote for those. So they will probably end up being inconsequential. They will end up being inconsequential. But so that's why I encourage everyone to keep an eye out for the corrected ballot, fill that out and get it in.
I'm going to take this opportunity to get or to ask Marybeth Kuznik, the Executive Director of VotePA, to open her microphone. She has joined us in this conversation as well. Welcome, Marybeth. Glad to have you with us. And I see you have unmuted your microphone. I'm glad for that. So talk to me a little bit. You've kind of heard a lot of our discussion, Marybeth. What are you most concerned about as we're looking at this myriad of issues facing us in the next 3 weeks?
Well, you folks know, first of all, can everyone hear me? I'm testing a new system. Good,
Yes.
thank you. Most of you know me as a worker, a founder and worker with VotePA, a statewide organization that works for better voting systems. I have now assumed a different role. I am currently, I'm still with VotePA. I mean, it's not adverse to my other role, but my new role is I am the election director of Armstrong County. For those who don't know, Armstrong County is just northeast of Allegheny. It touches part of Allegheny. We have about 43,000 voters right now, so it's not a large county compared to Allegheny, but we have a lot of the same problems here, some different. My biggest concern right now, and this might be a little bit of a different perspective from what you all have been talking about, but it could just as equally affect voters' suppression and voters' access to the ballot. These smaller counties, and even some of the bigger ones, because I vote in Westmoreland, and I know Westmoreland's been struggling, there is such a volume of voter application, and it's wonderful. I mean, I'm so glad everybody's wanting to vote, but we have so many applications coming in. Many of them are duplicates because there's confusion on the part of voters who may have checked box number 7 when they applied for their spring mail-in ballot. Now they're a permanent person. Then they get more applications sent to them. Again, well-meaning, many nonprofits and different groups have been sending these applications. They think, uh-oh, I'm not getting my ballot. They send a couple more in. The stack piles up. These staffs, county staffs are very small. I mean, I'm the only full-time person in this county. I have 2 or 3 part-time people, depending on which day of the week it is. And we are struggling to process everybody's application. And I feel really bad. I mean, I love voters. I want to help them. There's nothing I care more about than everybody getting to vote who should be voting and can be voting. If I miss an application because I'm swamped here, I feel terrible. We are catching up, the good news is, but it's a problem. And I think going forward, I mean, I'm not saying anybody drop the ball like at the state or anything else, because this is a whole new ball game. Act 77 was new. But going forward, we need to think about how, like for example, if you already are registered for a ballot in Sure, can Sure flag that so that you try to re-register for another one? It doesn't let you, rather than send an application to the county that has to be processed and take staff time. Little things like that could be changed. So this is really different. I mean, I have to tell you that it's very interesting to see this from the other side, and especially see it in the trenches. I apologize, I wasn't on the beginning of the call. I was doing a poll worker training with a bunch of folks at the local entertainment sports complex. But we need to be aware of things we could do as going forward with this mail-in to make it easier and make it easier for the. Oh, one other thing. So I don't know if you all are aware of this, and this doesn't affect Allegheny, but a lot of counties in the state have new election directors. I believe there's at least 17. It's close to a quarter, or maybe even over a quarter of the counties. Within the last year, or I started August 31st. I mean, and the election is November 3rd. This alone makes I know a lot about elections. I tell everybody I'm not new to elections, but I'm new to this. And some people don't even have any election experience, and they're tackling these roles. So y'all, everybody think about that. If you're not in Allegheny County, if you're in one of the outlying counties, your county may be facing this. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. So one of the other questions that I see coming up here and some of the most recent discussion, and I have been going back and forth on this discussion, is focusing on our senior citizens and getting their ballots delivered. So if I could get one of you to address the fact that you cannot deliver someone else's ballot.
I can address that real quick, Lynn. That is true. For the most part, that is true. And we had a number of people show up at the satellite sites this last weekend with 2, 3, and we did have to turn them away. The good news on that is if you have someone, you can fill out on VotePA a designation form that authorizes you to deliver someone else's ballot, and they'll take that form and the ballot will be accepted. Now, you can't show up and fill out that form on site because the voter whose ballot you are turning in must sign it, okay? So I encourage you to download VotePA. You go to that site, you can get that form, have it filled out, and bring it with you with your ballot, if you're returning that, and the person whose ballot you're returning. So the technical answer is yes, it can be done, but it does require an additional form to do it. If you don't have that form, then you can only turn in your own.
And William, I'm going to bring you back into this because you said something earlier about making a plan. What does that mean? Does that mean bring a folding?
Hello?
Uh-oh.
We lost Lynn.
Lynn? Does it mean bringing a folding chair? Yes, it does. It means doing whatever you need to do to cast your ballot. It means making sure that you have a ride to the polls if the polling place isn't close to you, knowing and verifying that you're registered at the address that you're actually living in. It means knowing where your polling place is, making sure your family and everybody, that your friends and everybody that you know, your neighbors are all prepared, and maybe go as a group and utilize the roll to the polls and contact B-PEP or Miss Brenda's group so that we can help you get to the polls. It's just being prepared so that when you get to the polls you avoid any issues or presumptive strike plans that people may have to try to prevent you from voting.
I don't know what Pittsburgh will look like on election day. And if it's any indication, I'm hoping that all the polls will be functioning, or the majority of them. And people will not have the same issues that they've had in Texas and Atlanta. I have family in Texas that had to go through those long lines down there. And I always tell the seniors, I've been telling them, when we were doing mail-in ballots, it was nice and warm. I said, but remember, we're going into November. So the most of them, that's how I convince most of them to maybe they want to do this mail-in ballot because it's going to be cold. So another thing that down in Atlanta, and like Will said, they have a plan. They are showing up at the polls. They are bringing their chairs. They're showing up as couples so that if they need something, and I'm talking directly to my community, so they're coming in couples so that if they need to run out, somebody's designated to go get something to eat or whatever. So they have a plan in those states. But here in Pittsburgh, the way this mail-in ballot is going and the satellites, I think that's going to sort of like lessen all the long lines that we are seeing around the country.
If I could just add, while we have a lull waiting for Lynn here,
Here she is.
on the
I was going to
on
say,
the
was it something I said?
just a clarification on the designated agent form, you do have to fill out a form that where you certify that you're disabled, where you're unable to return it. So if you were otherwise able-bodied and able to return it yourself, you do have to return it yourself. So I want to clarify that you can't just take your spouse's just because to save yourself the trip or to save the other person the trip.
Yes, one more. I want to just mention that I got a lot of the seniors when we got COVID, we couldn't go inside of the high rises anymore. So we designated seniors that live in the high rises to go around and do the mail-in ballot. So they got used to doing mail-in ballots. So then I get a phone call from one of the seniors that says, "Oh, I'm going to collect all the ballots and I'm going to bring them in." I said, "No, don't do that." So they were so used to, Andy beat us up real good about that. He told us, if you want to collect as many applications as you want, you can. And matter of fact, I had to be down every week. I was bringing down applications from the senior high rises. So, but I did have to make sure that the seniors, they're excited in the high rises. They are participating and engaged. And so a lot of those, I had to constantly repeat, do not collect ballots. Well, we'll bring them downstairs. Don't do that. So that's something that has to be reiterated and reiterated.
I agree. And let's just clarify, since we're recording this, that Andy did not beat up any seniors, just for the record. It didn't happen. Andy
That's the lawyer talking in
rules,
him.
made sure that everybody understood the rules, but Andy did not beat up any seniors.
He beat our ears. Let's say that. He beat our ears up. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I see one of the questions, and Brenda, you mentioned earlier Project 1599, and one of the questions is, are there other organizations out here that people should be aware of? I'm guessing that a lot of people like myself just heard of. I heard of that kind of, I'll call it a scam for lack of a better word, but I heard of that before, but never by name until today. Are there other organizations? And I'll address it to Brenda, but if anyone else knows of one by name that we should be aware of, this would be a good time to mention it as well.
Project 1599 is the one I know of, and that's because I got the phone call, and that's the one that we're following up. I understand, I can't remember what state, whether it's Michigan or Detroit, Michigan, or I can't remember the state, but they have all already filed suit with the U.S. Attorney's Office. There's 2 men that they've found that's responsible for, that's paid for and is responsible for this group. So 1599 is the only one that I know of.
Yeah, I think they were indicted. They indicted the 2 people they found that were responsible for those calls. And it wasn't just Pittsburgh, it was also places with Detroit was one, and
Yeah.
some of the, I think maybe perhaps Milwaukee, but I'm not sure. But I can't think of any other particular names. I know the Project Veritas is sometimes an organization that tries to like trap people entrap people, but I don't know of any other specific names.
And I see that folks have listed like the numbers, names, and phone numbers for election protection. Good idea to have that information with us at all times, especially as we go to the polls, because that's going to be where you need that information the most, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Pretty simple. Yes, you need to have that information.
Absolutely.
As they said, we as B-PEP and organizations, we will be outside of, patrolling the polling places throughout the day until the polls close, making sure that everyone is able to cast their vote. If anyone has any problems, the ACLU has lawyers and things like that on staff. And then you just call the 1-866-R-VOTE or www.bpep.net, and we will come out and do as much as we can. Go to the judge if we have to. Wake them up.
So are there judges that are available? Like I know at one time there would be judges that were on site, they were on the bench in the
Yes.
event. Does that still happen?
Yes, every county has an elections court on election day. There will be a assignment judge will issue an order. I think Allegheny's already designated. Andy probably knows better than I. Not every county has them designated by now, but by the election day, the election court is open starting at 7 a.m. and usually goes till 10 o'clock or at night or later.
Yeah, exactly. That is correct. Allegheny Counties is already designated. I know Judge James, the chief elections judge, usually starts off the morning. He will again this time. And he'll be working the post 8 p.m. as well. We're very fortunate to have him in that capacity. So yeah, and it's staff with a cast of my office staff's elections court. We will probably roughly double our staff in elections court. And we've asked the courts, elections courts in the assignment room on the 7th floor of the city county building. So we'll roughly double our staff. We're going to roughly double the phone lines available. So we're roughly doubling everything with regard to elections court.
And even when we talk about the Judge James will be there post 8 p.m., I mean, this could go well into the evening. I mean, we don't know. We have no idea, would you say? I mean,
yeah, I think that once the polls close, so elections court's mostly there for polling place issues. I don't doubt that there's going to be disputes and fights post poll closing. That's going to go to just court generally. That's not going to so much be an election court issue after 8 p.m. They're there after 8 p.m. if they have to keep any polling place open longer, something like that. But once the polls are closed at 8, we hope they are, everything's done at 8. We'll see where it goes. I mean, make no mistake, we don't anticipate 8 p.m. on November 3rd being the end of things.
all right.
If what we've seen so far in terms of lawsuits is any indication.
Right, that's exactly right. There have been a lot of lawsuits, but I also want to point out, because of the large number of mail-in ballots, even if it's going to be a high turnout election, those are not all going to be in-person voters, but there's going to be other things that impact lines at the polls. For example, COVID, social distancing, and the surrender ballot process that we talked about earlier. So there could still be long lines, but given the number of ballots that are being turned in via the mail, it could be that there aren't as many in-person voters as in a typical presidential year. I don't know, but I don't know if Marybeth has different thoughts or anybody else has different thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just told my poll workers in training, I said to plan to be here late. I mean, anybody that's in line at 8 o'clock, of course, we all know, but sometimes we all aren't sure that gets followed, but it will be followed on my watch. But I'm hoping, like Marion said, that we do have less people show up because they voted by mail. Armstrong County is actually a really kind of interesting little county. We have about 75% historically for every presidential. So if that's an indication, we could go higher, and that's going to make more voters. So, but this whole thing's a crapshoot. We don't know how many ballots to order. We've ordered 100% of the registered voters for in polling, which might be too high, maybe not. We don't know how many are going to turn in their mail-in ballot and want to vote in person. It is very unprecedented.
But if you are in line at 8 o'clock, you get to vote.
Yes.
Even if there are 285 people in front of you.
Yes.
Yes.
If you're
6 feet apart.
We vote if we have to go to 4 a.m. till the last voter gets into that room and cast his or her ballot. Yes, we will be there.
What will typically be done is they'll send one of the polling workers out at 8 o'clock to stand at the last spot. So if you're in front of that worker, you're in.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat about the spoiling of the ballot, the surrender ballot process, and whether the ballot can be marked. In my view, in my reading of the election code, the ballot could be marked, it could be blank, it's going to be spoiled, it doesn't matter. And as far as whether the poll worker sees the selections on the spoiled ballot, I don't think that matters too much either, but I'd be curious to hear what other people think about that. But the key is, and I have my ballot here, my mail-in ballot here. The key is that the ballot, which will look something like this is Chester County, so not Allegheny, and the return envelope, which will look, getting on the envelope, which will look something like this. This is the declaration. Let me see. Oops. I've got it upside down. This is the declaration. It's these two items, the ballot and this envelope. You can tell it's the return envelope because it looks like this. That's what has to be brought with you to the polling place. So
yeah, I would echo what Marianne said there. You can spoil a ballot whether it's been filled out or not. With regard to this, the polling worker seeing it, the simple fact is that they have to see it at some point. They have to verify that you're turning in a ballot. So you can't just turn in an envelope with a piece of paper in it. They have no idea what's in that envelope. So if you're spoiling a ballot, yes, they do have to see that you are indeed spoiling an actual ballot. So if you're worried about people seeing who you voted for and you already filled it out and you're spoiling your ballot, I don't think there's any real way around that other than to say, I doubt the person working there cares too much who you're voting for.
No, you don't need to return the secrecy envelope too.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You're right. You don't need to return the secrecy envelope, but they do have to see that you can't return, if you just return the secrecy envelope with the ballot in it, they'll have to open the secrecy envelope to verify that you are indeed spoiling a ballot, not your grocery list.
We're telling just for simplicity and to avoid voter confusion, we are telling them to bring all the envelope, the whole packet back.
Right,
Because
exactly.
if you tell them the declaration, they don't, whoa, I've got this, we're just saying, bring everything back and turn it in.
Now,
right.
there's a question in the chat. Will there be or are there extra secrecy envelopes available at the sites?
At the satellites, yes.
At the satellites, there are.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, but that makes sense, Andy. Okay. I'm just trying to catch up here. My instructor at the county training told us they weren't able to see the ballots. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I guess one of the other issues that has come up in the chat that we haven't addressed, and that is obviously we are here because of the League of Women Voters. And is there anything that they can offer any of your organizations to make things go smoother for you?
Well, as somebody mentioned in the chat, they are a source of trusted information as well. So get the word out to your networks and your constituents of good information of what to expect at the polls. Certainly we can work with the ACLU is happy to work with the League if they have any specific questions or needs for materials or information.
I would just say as an election director, one thing that everybody could ask voters to do is to try to get as much self-help as they can through these trusted sources. There's a ton of good information online. Yes, everybody doesn't have online, but those who do, please go to the Department of State, go to the League site, go to the trusted sources and try to resolve your problem, because all these calls and emails coming into election offices are really hampering the staff's ability to serve the voters that really need service. So, it's almost like triage, and I hate to feel that way or say that, but that's what it's getting to be right now.
And there's another question that came up, which I think is a valid question, because that secrecy envelope is supposed to be sealed. If for some reason you had to unseal it, is it still valid now because it's now been sealed and unsealed?
So your secrecy envelope is inside the outer envelope.
Right.
So there should be, once you put your ballot in your secrecy envelope, you shouldn't have to unseal that, I guess, unless you change your mind. But
No,
what
they're
we've had,
if they forgot the secrecy
yeah,
envelope, then
right. If you forgot it,
you could unseal it, and then I think it's okay if you tape it shut. I don't know, Andy, or anybody.
yeah, we've had a few of those. Here's what I encourage people to do, and I know if you can send it, it'll be accepted. The more, the more damaged your envelope is and is taped up. So, because what it creates is the possibility that it was tampered with by someone else, right?
By someone else, right.
So it'll be accepted, but boy, I would be real careful when you open that secrecy envelope. If you realize, oh my God, I put it in there and I didn't use the secrecy envelope, and let's be very clear, you must use it. You must use it. Supreme Court has been very clear about that. It has to be in there. If you don't put your ballot in the secrecy envelope, it doesn't count if you mail it in, okay? So everybody needs to know that. One other thing I'd stress on the secrecy envelope, don't write anything on it at all. There is no need to write thank you notes to poll workers. We got a lot of these things. There is no need to write how much you hate this candidate or that candidate or how good you feel about voting, whatever. Your message is your vote, okay? Don't write anything on it. Tell anyone you know, don't write on it.
Put that on social media.
Yes, if you identify yourself, your candidate preference, or your party affiliation, your vote might not count, okay? And that's a whole gray area about what definitively is identification of yourself or your whatever. But here's the simple answer. Don't write anything on it. Nothing. No smiley faces, no thank you notes, no nothing. And whatever you do, don't seal it with one of those return address stickers. Because guess what's on the return address sticker? Your name and your address. Don't do that. Don't do that. Leave it blank.
Leave it blank.
Now you got the Andy beat down.
I was
Dave, I didn't have to actually physically beat anybody. I just
But I think that's good to know because, my seniors, which I am, we love to put our address stickers on. And we will be checking when we get them on the buses. They want to do that. So that's a good thing to know.
We have just a few minutes left. How about if we go around and each person makes a closing thought, something they want to make sure we remember. William, we haven't heard from you in a while. Why don't we let you go first?
Yeah, I try to leave the technical stuff to the experts. But I just want to thank the league. I just want to thank you, Lynn, Miss Brenda, and everyone else that was involved with the panel. It was very informative. And I would just like to stress to everybody that, don't fall for the okie doke. Don't be discouraged. That we have a great county elections bureau. They're a great staff. They work hard. They deal with us and all of our issues. And just, be patient. If the lines are long, you have to be patient because your vote is one of the most valuable things that you have. And it's the only thing that equalizes you with everybody else in the country. So don't take it for granted. And there are many resources, and seek out the facts. And, we're not telling you who to vote for, but just do your homework and investigate. And there are resources out there to help you vote, and no one will be disenfranchised under the watch of the great coalition of people and groups that we have on this call. So I just want to thank everybody and encourage everybody to go to www.bpep.net, dial 1-866 or vote. If you have any problems on election day or any questions before, you can reach out to us, and we're glad to help anybody. And we're providing rides to the polls with partnering organizations like Miss Brenda. So I just want to thank everybody again, and everybody, we're stronger together than we are apart. So let's get it.
All right, thank you. How about you, Marybeth? You want to go next?
If I can unmute. Yes, I want to thank the league as well, and thank them always for their good work. This election, especially because we're all in uncharted waters here, folks, as we all know. In my new role, I would say to you, be kind to your local election director. They're really out here struggling. I mean, like you guys said, Allegheny County has a great election department, but some of the other counties, you know, the smaller counties, if you're out here in one of them, throw us some love too, because we're really, you know, it's really different to see this side. Not unexpected, but different. And just be excited, folks. This is such an amazing election. It is just so thrilling to see so many people fired up. I wish it was like this every election, but look at the good side. You know, we're getting more people involved than ever before. Let's just hope it stays, everybody stays American, and, you know, we're all on the side of our country, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda Tate.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters and you, Lynn. Definitely Andy. Andy has been incredible with helping us through this whole process. And I just want to add, I live with my 100-year-old aunt. She has spent her last couple of days listening to the hearings, and she's engaged. She's waiting on her ballot. Once it arrives, we were hoping that it arrived this weekend and she could go down to Shop and Save. But when it arrives, I'm going to drive her downtown. But I just want to help. I just want everyone to know, if you live near a senior, if you have access to them, make sure that you check to see that their ballots and everything that they're doing is right. If they need a ride down there, make sure you help them get there. Because I know our seniors are fired up and ready to do what they've always done, the seniors in my community. So again, I thank the League of Women Voters and to be a part of this really, really great discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. And Andy, as we come to you, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but wasn't there or isn't there a special arrangement for parking downtown for this? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, what they're doing is they have some staff out front sort of directing traffic, and they have some cones out, so it's not parking.
Okay.
But they are, to the extent that there's space available. You know, they did set up the booth, not the booth, the sort of table in the lobby of the county office building for the drop off, so you don't have to go up to the 6th floor to make it fast. And that's kind of as the traffic allows, you know, so I don't want to advertise that, but I do want to, if I can jump in, I do want to say, echo some of the sentiments. Thank you to the League and Lynn for your time, and the fellow panelists on here. It was really fun, and I would like to be able to spread the good word on this. I do want to echo the sentiments about the workers who are trying to put this stuff together. They're working incredibly hard under incredibly difficult circumstances. And I hear every day people tell me, this is the most important vote I'll ever cast. This is the most important election. So I would encourage everyone to tell people, if it's the most important thing we're going to do, let's act like it. Let's be patient. Let's do what we have to do. Let's understand that these are difficult circumstances. It may not be as easy as it was in the past. I think you can count on that. So let's recognize that going in, make a plan, be patient, and stick to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Marian, you get to have the last word from our panelists.
Well, thank you so much to the League for having me, and for Lynn for being such a wonderful moderator. And I really appreciate the work that Brenda Tate and William Anderson are doing on the ground in Allegheny County. It's so important. And again, echoing the sentiment about the election officials who are really working around the clock to ensure there's a great, you know, every vote can count. Here's my parting words for everyone. There is only one surefire way to make sure your vote doesn't count, and that's if you don't show up to vote. So with that, everybody go vote. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you all. And now I'm going to turn it back over to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists tonight. It was very informative. And thank you so much for being with us. And for Lynn, thank you for moderating it. Really appreciate your fine work. We want to just close with a poster that our voter service committee has come up with. This poster can be printed out and you can post it everywhere and anywhere. As you can see is the numbers that we've been talking about all evening, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, and the partners and to volunteer, protectthevote.net, training with Common Cause and B-PEP. So we just wanted to leave everybody with this. And if you go to League of Women Voters, pgh.org website, under voter resources, we have about 30 different graphics that were made up about everything and anything dealing with the election. So they can be printed out and sent or emailed to people to help with a lot of the disinformation that's going on as well. And again, I'd like to thank everybody and vote. Good night.